approach to it. I think that it's just important to recognize that like the provincial legislation needs to catch up and evolve with what modern transportation is. There are so many of these devices and micromobility devices. Now we see it all over in our municipality as well as many other municipalities. So we'll definitely be looking at doing some posting on our social media, and our officers will take that educational approach to it. I do foresee provincial legislation changing. There is a few different movements to getting Alberta Transportation to change their definition around micromobility and allowing e-scooters. There is confusion because e-scooters are allowed as a vendor e-scooter, and then but private are prohibited. So there's a lot of confusion around that provincial legislation that we're hoping that will change.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that response. So if there are like new vehicles or transports things that come out in the future, is that still covered under this prohibited miniature vehicles? Because you already listed them specifically. Will those be covered for just new technology that comes out in the future?
Through your worship to Councillor Abotoye, I believe the section that speaks to the prohibited use of these prohibited miniature vehicles, there is the list, and then at the very end, it basically encompasses
anything else similar. Okay, perfect.
Correct.
Well,
that meets that definition.
Much. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I'm going next. So under that, when I read it, it says the e-bikes. It says rollerblades, inline skates, so they're prohibited as well, or just the other ones?
Your worship, I believe that's the micromobility definition.
Oh, okay.
The prohibited miniature vehicle covers all of the motorized.
Okay. Okay. We'll just check on that. So I guess the only question that I have when we talk about education, how are we going to educate everybody that it's not the city that's the one that's prohibiting it, that it's the province? Because we're going to get blamed. So what's the thought on that?
Your worship, when we've had calls come into our office already, that's the direction that we've taken, is letting them know that it's provincial legislation that's pushing this. It's not necessarily our own bylaws, and that it's the province that's taken this stance, and we're just catching up with that here now.
Yeah, I understand that. I think my question's bigger than that. Maybe my question goes to Mr. Fleming. We're going to get a lot of complaints as council that we're now prohibiting this. Can our communications do some sort of, big blitz out or something that this isn't us, this is, because anybody who's got all of these motorized things, they're going to be not happy.
Through your worship, maybe just let me take that question away and talk to the team, but I do think there is something we should be able to do from a communications perspective to get the message out.
Okay. Couple other quick questions that don't relate to this. When you reviewed the traffic bylaw, the last time we updated it, we changed 48 hours parking on the street to 72 hours. Have you had much concerns with the extending it from 48 to 72?
Your worship, we haven't received any concerns from the public regarding that, and the 72 hours was to match provincially what an abandoned vehicle is defined as. So we were just matching provincially.
Okay. Okay, I was just curious on that one. Okay, just a second. We're going on to round two. Councillor Harris.
You touched on driveway aprons in your presentation. What's that all about? I'm looking through this stuff and I don't see that, but you had it up on the thing there. What am I missing here?
We're going to invite Brian Rogers to come and share with you what exactly is changing there.
And where is that changing? Because I'm not seeing it in the bylaw.
Through your worship to Councillor Harris, that's correct. We haven't it was a last minute addition, so we're just mentioning it today. It will be within the bylaw when we bring it back for 3 readings next week. Sorry for the confusion about that.
Yeah, okay. I might have been asleep when you made that presentation. I obviously was, because then I'm saying, okay, so where is this stuff? So sorry, I missed that. That was my bad.
Okay, Mr. Rogers.
Through your worship, Councillor Harris. So part of that goes along with each year we get a lot of questions about the apron in front of somebody's driveway. It's in disrepair. They feel the city should pay and fix it for them. And truly, the aprons are put in place when a residence is built, so it's truly accessing and for the purpose of that resident and resident only. So we don't go and repair those aprons. So we get some that people go, okay, no problem. They go ahead and they fix their apron and they do what they want. Maybe they want a bit of an extension and they'll make an application at that time. We do have a few that start going along the lines of they just don't start fixing when they leave them, and it starts to become a safety hazard. So we never had anything in place before to be able to go back and say, hey, just so you're aware, there is a bit of a line here that you need to be aware of, that if it does go to major disrepair, that the city could come back and do something about it. Do we really anticipate something like that happening? No, in all my years here, we haven't gone to a further extent of education and saying, here's, there was no apron here, you built your property, the apron was put in at the time of your build, you paid for it, it's yours to maintain.
So that'll be further discussion we're going to have on this in the future?
Through your worship to Councillor Harris, yes, next week we'll be bringing this back for 3 readings and we can discuss it further, and it will be in your documentation.
Yeah, I asked that question because obviously a driveway apron is located in public roadway. It's part of the public domain. Even though it was put in at the time, most properties were developed to give access to the driveway, which is partly on public right of way and mostly on private property.
Correct.
That gives access off of the thing.
Through your worship, Councillor Harris, the access has to take place within that public right of way to get through to your private, but the only reason it exists is for your property. Okay,
so you've raised this. I had a conversation with somebody. You see that picture up on the left where you can see the boulevard, which is grass.
Yep.
The individual that I was talking to, and it goes to this whole issue of the driveway apron as well, he's got a piece of that boulevard that ultimately is basically grass, but the neighbor drives over it, so it's dirt, and he has to maintain it, and so that's a bit of a problem. So when he called the department to find out what he could do there, if he could put stone in there or interlocking brick, he was told no, it had to be grass. Now I understand, I know what the history of it is, but ultimately speaking, they're responsible for that. But are they legitimately, under the bylaw, responsible for putting that to grass? Because we see lots of instances around the community, and it's more of a planning issue than a bylaw issue, where they actually do put interlocking brick, or they put in shale, or they put in stone, or in many instances, they just put in concrete over the grass. So what's our orientation, or what's our posture on that?
I can honestly not speak to that at this time, Mr. Harris.
Okay, well, I guess I'm asking that question because if we're going to do this, which I don't disagree with, it's a question of a clarification into what's our position, because somebody could say, I want a wider driveway apron there, and if I have to pay for it, I'm going to put it into concrete. What's the city position in relation to that? Because that's almost an educational thing that's come up in this conversation. Not so much about e-bikes and mobilities and all that sort of stuff, but you raised it, so I'm asking it now to have a better discussion in due course.
So through your worship, Councillor Harris, there is an application. You can do an alterations to public land permit if you wanted to widen your driveway, change it up. Like you say, if your kids keep driving over the corner and killing your grass, and you're like, I just want to widen a bit, you can go through an alterations to public land permit, get permission to do it. Currently, we look at its hard surface, which is going to be concrete, or depending on where you're at, Greenfield Estates, maybe asphalt. We do recognize that we need to start looking at other alternatives that may be more cost effective for people, i.e. a brick that might fit the neighborhood, or a stone or something like that. So that is a future conversation taking place, looking at what we allow for certain things that does need to come forth.
This is topical only insofar, and I don't want to take up more time, but the individual that brought that to my attention was told by the department that if there is an application, it would likely not be approved. So if we're taking a different posture on these things going forward, maybe we need to look at that. So that's just something.
They are individually looked at because we have to look at the parking availability within the community.
Yeah.
If it's right at the minimum for a parking stall and you want to widen your driveway, and now we're losing a stall on the roadway, you're probably going to get denied for the full. We have gone to, instead of doing the piece of the curb line, we do like a pie shape. So you may just have to angle a bit. We haven't taken away the parking stall
Okay.
on the roadway. So there is individual cases to be looked at.
And that's good to hear. And considering it's coincidental, it came up, and it's not relative to your stuff, but it is relative to our community and people's concerns about these things. So thank you for that heads up. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Nguyen. You're next.
This appears to me a bit of a ball of wax. So Alberta municipalities, Calgary, City of Calgary moved this, and then Edmonton sponsored it. The scope and breadth of type of communities we have in Alberta is what I'm like philosophically going to ask about right here, because obviously City of Calgary and City of Edmonton have much different aptitude for these types of devices being used on public roadways than City of Fort Saskatchewan, or if you want to say Fairview or any small town in Alberta. The TSA, as it reads right now, authorizes municipal councils to pass this bylaw, and the wording is not inconsistent with the TSA respecting highways under consideration or discretion. It doesn't say that we are required to be consistent with the TSA because it's an extremely subjective topic at the moment. My question to you is, and I'm going to give you three verses. What is the risk and liability in Fort Saskatchewan versus public safety versus quality of life and ability to recreate that gives our citizens enjoyment of life in Fort Saskatchewan? Good question.
Ms. Rayner?
Through your worship to Councillor Nguyen, it is a very good question. And so the MGA gives us the ability to create bylaws, and as long as we're not inconsistent with the Traffic Safety Act, and the portion around e-scooters is prohibited within the Traffic Safety Act. So we must align, it supersedes any bylaw that we can write. Edmonton and Calgary do allow vendor e-scooters, not private e-scooters. Actually, Calgary, in some instances, does allow their private e-scooters to be on their trail system. So it is varying degrees of the way different municipalities will approach this. We did receive a legal opinion that e-scooters are not allowed, and they are not allowed on our trail systems either because it is under the definition of highway. So we are just going along with our legal opinion around the risk and to be in alignment with the Traffic Safety Act.
Okay, subsequent to that then, are our trails considered highways under our current bylaws? I thought, okay, yeah.
That is correct.
Yeah, so subsequent to the one-wheelers that we were discussing, there's a handful of these in Fort Saskatchewan that at least I have seen. I know one person that owns one, drives it extremely responsibly, and that seems no different or akin to a skateboard and goes the same speed. So I think it would serve this small cohort of individuals who enjoy using this equipment. You see where I'm going with it, but yeah, I'll leave it at that for now, and we'll see where this goes come 3 readings.
Okay, Councillor Blizzard.
I don't have an e-bike. At this point, maybe I'll get one sometime, and I guess I'll make sure it's under the 500 watts. But so I'm unfamiliar. Are they clearly marked how much power they have? Is a 500 watt 25 kilometers an hour or lower speed?
Through your worship to Councillor Blizzard, you'd have to have the bike pulled over and do an inspection, and should be marked on the bike the wattage that it is.
So you'd have to pull somebody over, because I see tons
Correct.
of bikes. I just think that's a tough one to patrol unless they're going fast. And then I'm
Correct.
assuming 500, if they're over 500 watt, they have the capability of going pretty fast then. Eh?
Correct. Yes, it is very difficult to eyeball, especially with an e-bike, as to what the wattage is on that, unless you've got it pulled over. But yes, anything above 500 watts, you'd be able to travel faster, for sure.
Do you have like a radar gun that you can use for people? Like
You could, yes, for a
yeah.
bike, yeah.
Okay. And You know, when vendor e-scooters are allowed, I don't know, I almost think private ones would be the people that would be safer. A vendor doesn't maybe even know how to use it. But if we don't follow the provincial bylaws or provincial laws that are already in there, I assume we open ourselves up for some lawsuits, right, if something happens. So we'd kind of need these on our books.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Blizzard, that is why we wanted to make this change today, is so that we can be in alignment with the Traffic Safety Act to limit that risk.
Okay, yeah, I think we have to from that side of it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Betoye.
Thank you. My question is to Mr. Bryan. So just talking about a driveway apron, it's on the city's side, right? Is that the city's responsibility to build, or is that the builder's responsibility?
Through your worship to Council Abitoye, that would be the builder's responsibility when they're building the home.
Okay.
Or the developer if they put the neighborhood in and already decided this is where the alignments are going to go.
Okay, but it's not the city's responsibility.
So the example on the left, you have the apron, you have the city sidewalk, then you have the homeowner's driveway.
Right.
We maintain that concrete through there. If it cracks, falls, heaves, whatever, like we'll come and replace that, and we have.
Right.
For example, if a tree is in between there and that tree eventually pushes out that driveway apron, we're going to fix that because it was damaged by the city's tree.
All right, sounds good. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. That looks like all the questions. I'm just going to kind of go on notice with Ms. Bouger that maybe our next council meeting, there should be another notice of motion to have a resolution go to Alberta municipalities to advocate for consistency across the province when it comes to these. And other than that, all I can say is I know there's going to be a lot of sad children and a lot of upset parents who have already bought their kids all these toys, and we're going to get blamed. So tough skin, people. Be ready for it. Okay, thank you. And it's not your fault or ours. Okay, everybody's good. Nobody needs a break yet. You're good. Okay, then we'll get on to utility billing fee structures. Sadie Miller.
Good afternoon, Mayor and committee members. My name is Sadie Miller, and I'm the Director of the Utilities and Sustainability Department. The purpose of my presentation today is to provide a high-level overview of our current utility billing model, outline why a review of that model is being considered, and walk through the options administration analyzed in response to Council's updated strategic plan. In 2024, updates were made to the 2023 to 2026 strategic plan, and an initiative was added to investigate billing structures that more accurately reflect summer usage costs. The three options that I will be presenting today focus on adjustments to utility bills from May to September each year that either reduce costs for high water users or relay wastewater quantities and charges differently to customers. Currently, the city uses a water in equals wastewater out approach to billing. This means the volume of water metered at each property is also used to estimate the volume of wastewater treated. Customers are charged for the equivalent amount of wastewater regardless of where the water ends up. This approach works well most of the year, but in the summer, not all water enters the sewer system. For example, water used for lawns, car washing, or other outdoor purposes may instead enter the storm system, infiltrate into the ground, or be lost to evaporation. This can lead to customers paying wastewater fees on water that never enter the wastewater system. To put things in perspective, the city uses about 2.5 million cubic meters of water each year. Of that, roughly 8% is extra water used during the summer months. This additional usage contributes to about $590,000 in wastewater charges, even though that water likely isn't entering the wastewater system. After analyzing 3 years of average residential water use, we find that about 73% of households use more water in the summer than in winter. For many, the increase is quite small, but for others, it's significant, and it can mean paying $50 or more in extra charges per month from May to September. To address this, administration explored alternative billing models and has proposed 3 options for the committee's consideration. The first option is called winter averaging. With this approach, summer wastewater volumes are estimated based on each household's average winter water use. This assumes that winter use better reflects actual wastewater volumes and lowers charges for customers who use extra water in the summer. To balance out the reduced revenue, the wastewater rate would need to increase for everyone. Implementing this method would also require new utility billing software with stronger analytical capabilities. The second option is seasonal variable percentages. This method assumes that only 85% of water used during the summer months enters the wastewater system. 2 variations of this alternative are outlined in the report. One adjusts both water and wastewater rates, while the other only adjusts wastewater. Either way, overall charges stay the same for customers each month. The volumes are just reflected differently. The main drawback of this method is that it adds complexity to how bills are calculated and communicated, so it may result in confusion while not having a material impact on overall costs. The third and final option is tiered seasonal rates. This model increases water rates while decreasing wastewater rates for high users in the summer. It assumes that increased summer water use is primarily used for outdoor purposes and does not enter the wastewater system. Like the variable percentage options, this redistributes but does not reduce overall charges. When forming a recommendation for the strategic plan initiative, administration considered several key factors. First, it's important to understand that the city is billed by Arrow Utilities based on how much water we use and not on how much water is actually treated. So, even if we change how we bill our customers, it won't affect our own treatment costs. Second, lowering the cost of summer water use could lead to increased demand during peak months, which could put extra pressure on the water distribution system. And finally, it's worth noting that the rates shown in the report are estimates only. Future rate adjustments could lead to changes, and any shift to a new billing approach would require updates to the city's utility rate model. All of the billing model options we've discussed are possible to implement, but they would require time, staff resources, software upgrades, and potentially new tools through the city's ERP modernization. After reviewing the options and their impacts, administration is recommending that the current water in, wastewater out approach to billing be maintained. This is how our utility partners invoice the city, and it ensures cost transparency for utility customers. That concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Harris, you're first.
Ms. Miller, good report. I've obviously been advocating for this potential analysis for quite a while because ultimately it comes down to equity, and there are people in the community that say we're using water in the summer, we're paying wastewater charges. I think it's a question of education and the public understanding the fact that we do get charged, as all other member municipalities, the Arrow Utilities, for the water that we, in other words, metering sewage is difficult, correct? You would have to go to a volumetric calculation in some way, and that's expensive, and ultimately, will it change?
Through your worship to Councillor Harris, yes, it would require a capital investment to install meters capable of reading that wastewater.
Right, and so ultimately, we would also have to have a discussion with Arrow Utilities, I guess, to be able to change the methodology, because they have the cost of treatment, and they basically divide the cost of treatment between the water used in all 13 municipalities. Is that correct?
Through your worship, that is correct.
Right. So our bill ultimately is what it is. And if it's on less volume, there's going to be a higher per unit cost. Okay?
Through your worship, that is correct, yes.
So ultimately what I was trying to accomplish, or would hope to accomplish from an equity standpoint, is really not doable in the not too distant future, I would imagine.
Through your worship, that is correct.
And hence your recommendation, water in, wastewater out.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Blizzard.
So any changes we potentially make, we're still going to have to pay. Our bill won't change, right?
Through your worship to Councillor Blizzard, that is correct. Our invoicing or our revenue requirements to Aero Utilities will not change.
Exactly. So, I'm probably one of the houses that my husband loves watering in June, and our bill goes up for a while, so we could potentially benefit. But, if the city as a whole, if we have to do water in, wastewater out, and pay that bill, then I think that's the only way we can operate without adding issues, in other ways.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Batoye.
Thank you, Sadie, for your presentation. This is something that we've heard many times from residents, and I'm just wondering from the perspective of our utilities, are they looking into technologies that will make their billing method more accurate so that we're not the ones trying to figure out how to deal with the situation? I think it's an our utility issue.
Through your worship to Councillor Abatoye, although we are impacted by this, the decision ultimately does lie with Aero Utilities.
Right.
We did have a discussion with them, and they do mandate that all of their member municipalities are billed the same way. So it would have to be maybe a capital project at the Aero Utilities level, which would need to be brought forward from their board of directors. And if all member municipalities or the majority did choose to go in that direction, then I believe it would be up to them to work towards that. But yes, the city of Fort Saskatchewan alone does not have the ability to meter that.
I agree. So I guess the short answer is no, they're not looking into anything further. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And the last one, I'm just going to say it's really unfortunate. I know I've heard this from many residents for years and years. The kids are playing in the backyard, they got sprinklers on, and their alarm's going off because their consumption is up. I know for our household, we've really tried not to water our lawn as much, but our grass looks just terrible. And I said to my husband this year, we're watering. I don't care. I need green grass because it is so patchy, and I see that all over. And I think people are making a conscious choice not to water their lawns and asking to change their boulevards from grass to something else because they can't keep them alive unless they're watering, and it comes at an additional cost. So, this is kind of a sad meeting today. There's just nothing really positive. But I understand, I guess you're paying the piper one way or the other, but it does feel like when you're watering your lawn or you're doing your kids playing out in the front or the back, that you're being taken advantage of. But if we increase the rates, that's not going to make people happy either. So the report was excellent. Not much more I can say on it. All right. Thank you. Councillor Harris, round two.
Yeah. I as I said, I brought this matter up in the last term, and it's something that did concern me, but I respect the fact that ultimately, if we said that, 15% of the water you use from May until September goes onto into the storm, and so we're not going to charge you for it, we still have to pay that bill to Aero Utilities unless they change their methodology. And I don't I don't expect anytime soon that Aero Utilities is going to look to change that. They have a utility model that ultimately they have to fund to operate the treatment of primary effluent, from 13 member municipalities. And so ultimately, I don't see them doing that anytime in the not too distant future. So it is what it is. But I raised this because I was aware the city of Lethbridge ultimately does have a variable rate in the summer. And so they actually slide between the two. And in talking to Aero Utilities officials, they've indicated that they own both and operate both the water and the wastewater treatment, as opposed to having to negotiate with an external commission, either water or wastewater. And so it's easier for them, and some might suggest that perhaps they're not doing a full cost accounting, ultimately, when it comes down to it. So they ultimately how they recover costs is, I guess, a local perspective. Here, obviously, we do have that issue of having. I think that this was an important bit of information that we want to keep in track, and I would suggest we want to probably diarize it to continue our discussions with Arrow Utilities to see if we can find a more equitable way to deal with the allocation of costs. And there are different models and different methodologies. So I would say don't park this on a shelf or forget about it. I think it should be something that we continue to have a discussion with Arrow and the other 12 member municipalities to find that equity relative to charges for wastewater treatment. It's not going to get cheaper, I don't think. So ultimately where it goes, I guess time will tell.
Okay, thank you very much for coming out and presenting today. And again, it was a very good report, so thank you. Are there any councillor inquiries to administration? Not seeing any. We do have a closed session item on off-site levies, so I'll take a motion to go in camera. Councillor Harris. Thank you. Call the question. Please cast your vote. And that is carried. Thank you. We will go to in camera.